All right. Not enough women or gays at the Cellar table. Oh, boy. Here we go. Oh, Red Dick Billy. All the controversy in stand-up comedy. He goes, I was hoping to get your take on an article I came across on Facebook called Tear Down the Boys Club That Protected Louis C.K. That's that witch hunt thing that I'm saying. Like, we had fucking meetings every week. All right, what are we going to do here? Say, we're going to... You know? And how everybody else, the second that, evidently, everybody else on the other side, the second that Gawker article came out, you know, immediately took a criminal justice course and just became some gumshoe and went out and bought a giant magnifying glass and walked around looking for clues. All right, it's written by a gay comic who figures basically going after Louis wasn't enough, so he is trying to go after his peers also. Yeah, the witch hunt. The author cries about a certain table at the Comedy Cellar where elite comics like Chris Rock and Jerry Seinfeld sit. Like when the table came about, by the way, Jerry Seinfeld was still doing Seinfeld. You know what I mean? I don't know if they actually had a place called The Table. When I first started going to the Comedy Cellar, there wasn't a table. Comics just went upstairs and they sat all over the place. And I am convinced that the reason why the table was started was because of Patrice. Because Patrice was so loud and so funny and he was just all over the upstairs. They were trying to somehow contain him. He was like Jordan, you know, you're not going to stop him. Let's just see if we can contain him. So I think they just tried to get us all seated in one area so they could at least be like, okay, sit down and fold your fucking hands and listen to the teacher, right? That's how I remember it anyway. So he goes, he also has never even tried to perform at the Cellar himself. It's kind of like a fourth grader crying to the teacher because the cool kids won't hang out with him. The article implies that by not speaking up about it, the Cellar comics were somehow protecting Louis, even though they were just rumors until recently. Also, the owner of the Cellar, where are we? My fucking screen went dark. Sorry. Also, the owner of the Cellar had some great things to say in the comments. Here's a link to the article and go fuck yourself. Yeah, I read it. And, you know, to be honest with you, considering this guy's also a fellow comedian, I feel bad that that was his perception. I feel bad that that was his perception of what the table was because, you know, the table was like, I don't even know how to explain it. Like, that was something like the level of pounding that you had to take. You had to go there and just basically get ripped to shreds. And then what everybody at the table wanted to do, and it wasn't doing it to just be mean. It was just, it was just this comedian thing. So you'd sit down and like you'd sit down with like whatever you were hung up about with yourself, and they would give another 40 things about you physically that you didn't even notice that you should also be self-conscious about. However, in the end, all they wanted you to do was come back at them and trash them back. And if you did, you were in, regardless. All right? And there was some epic fucking back and forths at that table. You know, and people definitely got mad sometimes, but the table wasn't like what a lot of people who didn't go to it think it was, like this big bullying thing. It was also this amazing thing where, like, I listened to Jewish people and Arab comics going at it, talking about the Middle East. I'd listen to Patrice and, you know, Manny Dorman, their debates. Colin Quinn was there. And if I remember correctly, Tough Crowd came out of those conversations at the table. And if you watched Tough Crowd, it'd be these comedians talking about these deep issues while trashing each other. And I always felt that the table was inclusive as long as you were willing. You had to fucking walk the gauntlet. You just had to fucking do it, and you had to survive it. And then if you did, you actually became a better comedian, because once you got in at the table, then there was this thing, you couldn't not sit at the table. You'd come in and be, hey, Bill, come on. They wanted you to sit at the table because they wanted you to trash you, and then they also wanted you to trash them back. But, you know, I wasn't even part of the elite crew. I wasn't funny enough. I just wasn't. Like the as far as this is just my perception of it was the table was Patrice, Norton, Voss, Keith Robinson, Colin Quinn, and later on Kevin Hart. Kevin Hart, right? And even he was sort of like just like a rookie. But he also made it so fast that he didn't have time to fucking stay there. So that was like the Mount Rushmore of the table. And when you showed up and they were all there and somebody had something on you, like that time, I for 24 hours said I would do stand up on a bus on the way to a World Series game to get a World Series ticket, and I never even ended up doing the gig. I took a headlining set pounding that is still legendary. They told the fucking story on Opie and Anthony. I believe Kevin Hart and them all told the story, man. I got fucking destroyed. So this guy, like, suggesting that it was all like everybody was like, there was this team of people. It wasn't. It was fucking cannibalistic. All right? Everything that they said in Opie and Anthony was 100% true, except for the fact that I did the gig, because I didn't do the gig. I actually gave the gig to somebody else, and with the vow of silence, I said, I will never tell anybody that you did this gig, because I don't want you to go through what I just went through. I think the guy who did the gig actually might have said that he was the one who did the gig all these years later, but I'm not saying shit who it was. So anyways, once you got in at the table, then you would go downstairs to go do your set, and one night, everybody at the table would be like, you know what, we're watching your set tonight. And you'd be like, oh, fuck. And you would go downstairs, you'd go on stage, and the crowd couldn't see all these fucking asshole comics. I remember they would all be backlit, standing in the hallway, Patrice's big, dumb, stupid head. And you'd have to go up there and, like, just commit to your jokes as they were all standing there making faces of disgust, heckling, making noises. And one time I told the joke and it went good, and as I was telling the joke, I had the nerve to actually try to say something in a joke, and Patrice would just go, just do that fucking noise, and then they would all crack up laughing. Then the crowd would laugh like, what the fuck, and get a sense of, like, other comics are laughing at this guy. Should we be laughing at him and not respect him as a human being? And then you would just start bombing. And I'll never forget, I remember Kevin Hart went downstairs, and he went up as a 20-year-old comic and survived it and was barely affected. I mean, I know. And then looking at all the stuff that he's doing now, like, you really saw what he was made of. It was a great thing. The Cellar table is not what this person perceived it to be. And I feel bad that person, because having a fat gay guy comic there would have been great. There would have been a whole other angle. It was actually a really inclusive thing. It's just a lot of people weren't tough enough to get through it. And that's the truth. And it took me, like I said, like a half dozen attempts, because I was not a mentally strong person back then. And but if you see what came out of it, Colin Quinn's Tough Crowd, that was one of the most inclusive shows of all time, as far as, like, he gave almost like 2.5 generations of stand-up comics a TV credit. A lot of them their first TV credit. So I don't know, and I know someone's going to sit down and watch Tough Crowd and be like, oh, it was mainly white males, blah, 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 and all that fucking shit. So I don't know. There's no way to win this type of stuff, but I can tell you that I don't agree with this person's perception of it, but I don't have any anger towards that person for writing that, if that's what they think it was. But it's a little melodramatic. Burn the table down, like there's these meetings going on, and we're all sitting there trying to hold back his career or whatever. I mean, I don't fucking know. All I remember as far as, like, trans comics, I just remember there was, I don't know what the proper term was, but there was a guy who dressed like a woman who went on stage and went by the name Sharon Needles. And she used to go up at the Boston Comedy Club, and she was fucking hilarious. And the last time I looked her up, I believe she was still doing shows. I think she just got out of the stand-up scene. But there was no comics going, oh, what the fuck is this fucking person doing here? Like, this all comedy is if you're fucking funny, other comics are going to laugh and you get their respect and you're in. everybody has a different fucking road, but everybody's just sitting there going like, just, I don't know what they're, it's everybody's looking out their own head, and it becomes their experience is fact and truth, and anybody else's experience is bullshit or something like that. So all I'm doing here is I'm telling my side of, that's how I perceived it. And I just remember for the longest time, like I remember one night we fucking were outside the Comedy Cellar. We trashed each other for so fucking long, and it was so goddamn funny. It was so late in the night that this woman in an apartment above the Comedy Cellar poured water down onto us to get us to shut the fuck up. And going back, you know, like a lot of moments like that in life, I wish I could have realized how amazing that was during that time. Because as far as I was concerned, the table, this table that this guy wants to burn down, that died. The table died when Manny died, because, you know, he was the creator of it. And he was one of the great conversationalists that I ever met. And he was so goddamn funny. And what I loved about him is he wasn't a malicious guy. As much as, I used to fucking argue with that guy. You know what I mean? I was a young, angry man. And I used to argue with that guy. And he was always, the next day, it was always over. And I actually kind of learned from him. I learned from him and Bobby Kelly how to squash an argument. Where, like, how you'd be like the next day, just, you know, because I didn't grow up in a family like that. It was just basically you didn't talk about it, and then you didn't talk for 3 days, and then fucking 4 days later you say, hey, you see the Celtics game last night? Yeah, it was a good game. And then everything was lingering. Those two people, I learned how to have a functional end to an argument. So, yeah, I don't know what that shit's about, but it's unfortunate that person feels that way about it. But, you know, everybody's entitled to their opinion. Yeah, no, Patrice was getting banned from comedy clubs all the time. All the time, but he was so fucking good, they had to let him back in. It reminds me of when I read this Miles Davis book, and he was talking about Charlie Parker, and when he would party too much and pawn his horn and these clubs would kick him out, they'd eventually have to fucking bring him back in because he was the best, and Patrice was the best. And, you know, as much as he would drive him nuts, you wanted him around. You wanted him around. It's just like the comedy dropped by 40%, even with all the other comics still going there, if he wasn't there, and just the fun. And then they also knew that if they banned him, that none of the comics were going to hang out at their clubs. We were all going to go to where he was. Yeah, so then they would let him back into the club. And then they created the table. That's how I remember it. That's how I thought that we'll have them all, these fucking lunatics, just have them sit in the back at the goddamn table. So then we were sitting down, and it just, you know, it was just a bunch of dogs in a fucking pit. And then that's how the trashing was already happening. I remember one night, you know, after I took the pounding for fucking the bus gig that I never even did, I remember when Bobby first shaved his head, he came in. And I always respected him for this. He came in, he had like a hat on, and he sat down right at the the fat gay guy comic here. Listen to this story. He didn't shy away from the table. He fucking walked right in, sat down, took his hat off, and looked at everybody like, all right, give it to me. Let's hear it. And fucking everybody just, it was like a Def Jam bit. He took his hat off, and everybody just, what the fuck? He took this fucking pounding, and everyone was getting him, and he was just sitting there taking it, laughing, and all that type of stuff. And I actually thought he looked good with the shaved head, right? And what's his face? Who said it? I think it was Esty. Esty finally got him with one. I think she said, "You look like David Wells." I think that's what she said, and everybody fucking died laughing. And Bobby literally just stood up and just walked out. And I remember thinking, like, I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know you could walk out. I saw Keith Robinson do that one time, too. We were trashing his clothes so fucking bad And he was trying to fight back, and he was just feeling that wave was going to crash over him. He just fucking ran out the door, got in his car, and drove home to Jersey. And we kept texting him and calling him, going, "You can't do that, you can't do that." He was like, "Oh yeah, well I just did, stupid." He fucking hung up on us, laughed and hung up on us. Oh my God, I remember that fucking time Patrice. Somehow we found out he was home on a Saturday night. He just took like a night off. And Jim Norton fucking came in and said, "You know where Patrice is right now? He's at home on a Saturday night." And they all called him up, and on speakerphone, Patrice just picks up. He's like, "Hello." And Jim's like, "What the fuck are you doing home on a Saturday night? You don't have any gigs?" And Patrice just fucking roared laughing. And we all, over speakerphone, trashed him. He was at home getting trashed at the table. And I just remember him he loved every fucking second of it. The table's one of the great things ever. So, don't listen to that guy.